that, I'd like to welcome all you guys to this webinar here. This is how to protect your privacy online. My name is Arian. I'm a community technologist at DoSpace. And kind of the way I kind of chose to set up this webinar is really I kind of chose to kind of have some more, let's say, extreme measures in how do you protect your privacy online and a few, let's say, more casual measures. Things like maybe just altering a few settings, and on the extreme side, maybe something as severe as completely and totally changing your entire operating system. So hopefully you guys kind of like some of these. Hope you guys find some of these interesting. I definitely would kind of suggest and recommend that if you do find any of these kind of interesting, definitely give it a shot for a week or maybe 2 weeks. Just kind of see how you feel. And the reason why I kind of say that is because the more kind of privacy that you have, kind of typically the more private you become, the kind of trade off is that you give up some sort of convenience. So kind of hopefully by going through this, you guys can kind of find a nice balance that works for you. And so, kind of with that, I'm just going to jump right into it here. So, the very first thing I would kind of recommend that you guys do is really kind of focus on a more kind of let's say, a privacy centric browser. Obviously, the browser is kind of the gateway to the internet for the vast majority of us. And so, as you can kind of see this little kind of graphic at the top here, you have a wide variety of browsers to choose from Chrome, Safari, Microsoft Edge, Firefox, et cetera, et cetera. And I would kind of lump, let's say, Chrome or any even Chromium based browser and Safari and Microsoft Edge. I would lump all of those into, let's say, one end of the spectrum and the, let's say, maybe less private end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the really strict and the really private end of the spectrum, I would put something like, let's say, a Tor browser, maybe Brave, and somewhere in the middle would be Firefox. And I'm probably going to highlight Firefox a little bit more than more than maybe some of you would have guessed in this, but Firefox really does a really good job of kind of maintaining your privacy. And I'm actually going to pop over to this page here. I'm going to open up Firefox. And kind of one of the things that Firefox does differently than the vast majority of other web browsers is Firefox actually blocks a lot of trackers that exist on websites, whether they are trackers from Google or trackers from Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. Firefox does a really good job of blocking those trackers. And so we can quickly see that here. This is Firefox. I have it up. We can go into our privacy protections. This is actually my work computer, and I actually typically don't use Firefox for work, but you can kind of see it's already blocking a few trackers here. It looks like we blocked about 49 today. You can quickly and easily do that. And typically, in terms of settings, let's say, for instance, you didn't want to shift over to a Firefox and you wanted to keep Chrome or you wanted to keep Safari or you wanted to keep Microsoft Edge, I would definitely recommend that you don't save any of your browsing history, any of your cache, any of your cookies, or at least set it to kind of automatically delete these. And so in Firefox, typically I keep mine at about the strictest setting. Uh, it comes on your kind of default of your standard setting, and that's going to block a lot of the trackers already. But the strict mode just really does a much more severe job of that. And kind of like I was saying a little bit earlier, this actually could be a little bit inconvenient for you as maybe some aspects of a website now fail to load. So you actually may end up shifting between, let's say, standard mode and strict mode, and maybe even I think a kind of custom mode here. But I would definitely recommend that if you choose not to use, let's say, Firefox, or you choose not to use um, let's say the Tor browser or Brave, that you definitely kind of alter your settings to clear cache, don't save cookies, and to clear your browsing history. And this can really easily be achieved inside of Firefox and also inside of Chrome. But honestly, just doing a new private window inside of Chrome, it will be called a new incognito window. And all that does is it just doesn't save any cache, any cookies, and any of your browsing history just for that session. And if any of you have ever used that, you can kind of see how that can be a little bit inconvenient. When all of a sudden you go to Amazon.com and your username doesn't immediately kind of populate the text box, that can be a little bit inconvenient for you. So like I said, typically the more private you become, the more of a kind of convenience trade-off happens. So let's go back to this first window here. So no, yeah. Honestly, I also kind of wanted to highlight. Actually, I'm going to kind of skip Tor for a brief second, and I wanted to kind of briefly touch on that. If you didn't want to move to another browser and you were comfortable with your existing browser, maybe your existing browser actually has a built-in VPN. I'll talk about VPNs a little bit later with a little bit more detail, but I'll really just say that some browsers, I know Opera for sure has a built-in VPN, and that's going to kind of hide your traffic online. And Firefox has a built-in VPN that's currently in beta. So you're actually gonna have to do a little bit of a search for it. But like I said, I'll touch on VPNs a little bit later. But kind of another thing I wanted to touch on is the add-ons. I'm not gonna recommend too many add-ons, but if you wanted something similar to the features that Firefox is offering with blocking a lot of trackers on websites, whether they be trackers from Google or trackers from Facebook, et cetera, you can always kind of look for add-ons in the in the add-ons menu. Kind of the one that I will recommend is probably HTTPS everywhere. That's really much more for security. It's just going to kind of force all aspects of that website to load up under the HTTPS protocol. And you can easily kind of go, I believe it's just here, and then I believe if we go to add-ons, it'll take us to the add-on page, or at least this is in Firefox. It's very similar if it's in Chrome as well. You'll go to the add-ons page. You can just search for um, uh, uh, I guess tracker blockers, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, I'm not really going to recommend any of those, but you can definitely vet them yourselves and kind of see how they work yourselves. But on the more extreme end of your internet browser is the Tor browser, which stands for the Onion router. And I'm just going to kind of demo it here as I talk about it. And basically, what it does to me in my mind, I always kind of visualize it as very similar to how a VPN works, where it actually takes your kind of data. Let's say we were wanting to go to, let's say, just simply google.com. It takes that data, it lobs off a bit of your address, it then encrypts that, and then it sends it through an entire kind of series of servers. That's kind of why it has that onion. The onion is the O in Tor. It sends it through a series of kind of layers or a series of servers, completely kind of randomizing who is requesting that information. And then it decrypts it on the other end, and it looks like it's coming from whatever that last server was. So if we go to, let's say, google.com here, see, it's going to take a little bit because it's not just going straight to google.com. It's going to, it's encrypting your data, and then it's going through a bunch of different servers, and then it's going to google.com. And probably one of the first things that you're going to notice here is that this is not, that it actually doesn't think that I am coming from America. So I would say, just like with a VPN, it really only recognizes that last server that it came out of. Looks like it thinks we're in the Netherlands. So all of our searches are going to be completely and totally kind of anonymous in terms of Google. So yeah, the Tor browser, just like with Firefox or Chrome, you can also kind of adjust your security settings. The Tor browser is just this little shield up here. And Tor actually gets incredibly strict. I'm not going to kind of go over the different versions of it, but at its most strict, you can see it actually is going to block or kind of change pretty much any media or images that come to the website, which is going to make you, excuse me, it's going to make you significantly more private. But what it's also going to do is, it, like I said, it really is going to make it a lot less convenient for you if you go to a web page. If you go to a web page and all of a sudden images aren't loading and videos aren't loading, but it is an option if you really want it to get very serious about your privacy concerns. But the Tor browser is something that I personally have installed on my personal computer. I definitely use it often, although typically my day-to-day browser is Firefox. But if you're really concerned about your privacy concerns, the Tor browser does the best job. It is a free browser that exists out there. It truly does the best job of kind of randomizing and kind of anonymizing who is requesting the information. So I'll go back to the PowerPoint here. And honestly, we can go on to the very next slide. And this one, I would say, changing your browser may be a little bit difficult or even cumbersome for some people, but this is actually a very easy step that you can do to prevent, let's say, Google or Microsoft from collecting and saving data and then either utilizing that data themselves or allowing their advertising partners to utilize that data. A really simple thing that you can do is simply to not use Google, not use Bing, not use Yahoo, and actually use an alternative like DuckDuckGo, StartPage, or Quant. There are a few other kind of privacy-centric search browsers, but DuckDuckGo to me is probably the most popular one, and it's also the one that I use the most. But just like with kind of Tor or VPN, it does come with some downsides. And the downsides, to me, the main downside is that it isn't, in my opinion, it isn't as accurate as Google. I think Google is kind of synonymous with search for a reason. But DuckDuckGo, if you're really concerned about kind of your privacy and you're really concerned about, let's say, Google or Microsoft kind of saving and storing your data and allowing their advertising partners to utilize that data, honestly, DuckDuckGo is going to be, DuckDuckGo or StartPage or any of the other kind of privacy-centric browsers are going to be the way that you should be going. As they honestly, they won't save any of the information of who is requesting it, and they won't even say that you requested the information. So So it's really, really going to be a very, very private service for you. And yeah, you can set that to your homepage, just like you may have Google set to your homepage, or you can even set it to your default search in your taskbar to just go straight to DuckDuckGo. That is probably one of the easiest things that you can do, and one of the easiest things that I would recommend that you do is to simply utilize DuckDuckGo. So with that, well, honestly, we'll go on to the next page, and this one is maybe a little bit contentious. I kind of debated whether I would include it or not, but really, if you are utilizing a social network, you by a social network's kind of just very nature, it's the exact opposite of privacy. And by their very nature, you are asked to put out as much information as soon as it happens in kind of most circumstances about yourself, which is the exact opposite of being private online. So kind of the first thing I say is that they're not free. Like all of these social Facebook may appear to be free, Instagram may appear to be free, but in reality their product is you. Their product is your data. Their product is the information that you willingly and freely give them and allow them to use. And when I say use, I don't mean for like nefarious purposes or anything like that. Really, it's just to collect data on you to allow their advertising partners to better sell to you. So not for evil purposes or for nefarious purposes or anything like that, really just to better sell to you. But I personally know some people that actually really like that, really like that if they're looking for a 2008 Ford Focus and they go on Facebook and they see an ad for a 2008 Ford Focus that's 30% off. Some people really like that, and some people find it really intrusive. So one of the things that I will honestly say is if you have the time, definitely take a look at those terms and conditions. I guarantee you're going to find some really kind of intrusive and invasive things that you are agreeing to when you are using these kind of social platforms. But in reality, there's very little you can do as long as you continue to use them, which is why my extreme step for this is actually just to stop using them altogether whatsoever. As long as you're using them, as long as you're putting your data and your information out there, you're making it incredibly, incredibly, incredibly easy to figure out who you are, to figure out your wants, your needs, your desires, and really make it really easy for these corporations, whether it be Facebook, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. You're making it incredibly easy for them to kind of mine data on you, and you're making it incredibly easy for their advertising partners to mine data on you. But one of the tips that I will kind of recommend is that maybe you can just limit who has access to your social media, right? Like, so is everyone that you are friends with on Facebook your actual friend? And the same for Instagram and Twitter, et cetera, right? Just simply limit who has access to that information. It's going to be really difficult for you to limit Facebook from seeing what you're doing while you're on Facebook, or Instagram from seeing what you're doing while you're on Instagram, et cetera, on down the line. But you could limit who else maybe has access to that information, and maybe even get a little bit creative. If you really wanted to go the true, like full on extreme edition, you could always create multiple Facebook accounts with your name and a different birth date and just random information about yourself. You could really kind of go wild with it. But I would say the ultimate thing that you can definitely do is just to stop using them, or just to limit your use of them. Um, like I said in the very beginning, the entire purpose of kind of Facebook and Instagram and all these other pieces of social media is the exact opposite of privacy. So as long as you're using them, as long as you're giving them access to really kind of every part of your personal life, it's going to be very difficult for you to maintain your privacy online. And kind of with that, I'm actually going to take this time to really kind of talk about VPNs a little. So to me, VPNs and kind of utilizing a different browser and utilizing a different search engine, to me, VPNs are another really easy thing that you can do to kind of anonymize yourself online. As you can see by this little graphic here, I found this little graphic. I didn't create it, sadly, but I found this little graphic where you're a little kind of hedgehog, porcupine little guy here. And then basically what a VPN does, it's very similar to what I described in terms of the Tor browser, is it takes your information and encrypts it, and then it sends it to a server somewhere in the world, maybe in America, maybe not in America, and then it comes out and it decrypts it. And the only kind of IP address that the end source sees, let's say you were just trying to reach google.com, the only IP address that google.com sees comes from that server, comes from whatever the VPN server you have chosen or was chosen for you. So really what that does is, you can kind of look down below here, is it really is going to stop any kind of corporate entities like your internet service provider from kind of seeing what traffic you are visiting. And it could even potentially stop any kind of let's say nefarious hackers from kind of seeing what you're doing. One thing that I always kind of say is, any sort of motivated government, whether it be our government or another government, any government with kind of sufficient motivation kind of nothing I say is really going to be able to stop them. They really have tremendous power in terms of invading your in, in terms of invading your privacy when motivated to do so. So as long as you are really just truly concerned about your privacy, this is really going to be a really good option for you. Like I was saying, it's going to be really tough to kind of thwart any government. If any government wants to see what you're doing, trust me, they're going to find a way to see what you're doing. They have the time and the manpower and the know-how to figure out how to get by every single tip that I'm going to give you, and any other tip you're going to be able to find online. But all of them in together is going to make it incredibly difficult for any kind of corporation or any kind of nefarious hacker to be able to see your information. And so I think, as I was saying earlier, some browsers actually have built-in VPNs. That's another really good option. Although I would kind of maybe caution to stay away from free VPNs, because just like with your maybe your internet service provider being able to see your data, maybe you don't want a VPN that maybe is going to be really easy to be hacked, or maybe even is willingly selling your information to be able to see your data. So that is actually kind of leads me into some of the downsides of a VPN. I think the first one that most people notice is that most kind of reputable ones do cost. They do actually end up costing you money. But kind of one of the main downsides that most people notice is, just like with our Tor browser, you may have noticed that when I went to google.com, it took it maybe about 3 seconds to go to Google. Typically, that would be an instantaneous kind of google.com. Is very quick. But because it is encrypting your data, decrypting your data, sending it to at least one server, that is adding time. So using a VPN is definitely going to be slightly slower than if you were just surfing the web normally. And kind of another negative of using a VPN is that some websites actually scan for and detect your VPN and won't allow you to utilize that website while using your VPN. So something like Netflix or like Amazon Prime Video, they actually won't allow you to access their sites while using your VPN. So me personally, I actually use a VPN on my phone. I use a VPN on my computer, and it's definitely something that I've run into where every now and then you will run across a site that says, "Hey, you're using a VPN. You can't use a VPN on this site." But I really do think it is a really good and honestly a really easy way to kind of definitely remain private from your internet service provider and from any kind of, let's say, hackers or anything like that. It's a really easy and really simple way to kind of achieve that goal. And so, kind of with that, I'm actually going to head on to the next slide here. And this next slide, a little bit of a bonus slide and a little bit about phone privacy. And kind of phone privacy is, I would say, it's very similar to your computer's privacy. There are special browsers. I know Firefox Focus, I think, came out not too long ago, and it is a much more privacy centric um, browser brought to you by Firefox. Tor has a version of iOS and Android. And I think something else that I failed to mention with the Tor browser is Tor is actually built on Firefox. So if you're used to using Firefox, you'll be really at home with Tor. But if you are even interested in, let's say, some of the features of kind of Firefox with kind of anti-trackers, which are going to stop, let's say, Google or Facebook, et cetera, from kind of being able to track where you've been and where you're going, and to kind of pull that data into a more complete picture of you, you can, of course, there are anti-tracker applications that can be downloaded. Like I said, I'm not really going to recommend any of those. You guys can kind of do a quick search and kind of vet those on your own. But I think they do come with a few added features. I personally use a kind of anti-tracker on my phone, which the one I use actually often shows me kind of how many trackers it kind of detected today, which trackers it actually detected, and kind of the total over time. And it really is kind of very useful, and it really is very useful information. And kind of another thing that I will point out specifically in terms of your phone is actually maybe don't use, let's say, an Instagram or Facebook or other kind of forms of social media inside, or rather, don't download the application. Actually use that application inside of a web browser. Now, that's not going to make you too much more private. Maybe you'll be, 5% more kind of private. I mean, obviously, if you're on Facebook, they're still going to be able to kind of see you and see what you're doing, but it'll give you a little bit more privacy, and it'll kind of allow you to block a few more third-party trackers. And kind of another thing that I kind of wanted to mention is actually your kind of email address. So in terms of email, if you ever go through your emails, terms and conditions, and I would even say this even goes a little bit into data compartmentalization and how you really want to kind of compartmentalize your online life to prevent a complete picture of yourself being built. So maybe you don't want to use in a kind of email service that is also where you go to watch videos and where you go to browse the internet, and maybe even where you go to create documents in terms of Google. Maybe you don't want to use that. Maybe you actually want to split up each of these things individually to make it a little bit trickier for them to kind of invade your privacy. But in terms of email, they actually can kind of scan and read your email and kind of save and collect that data and use it just like they would use any other form of data. They're going to use it for themselves to kind of better understand you, and they're going to use it for their advertising partners to better sell to you. So there are a few kind of options in terms of privacy-centric email addresses. There is a company called, I think, Proton Mail and Tutunota. Those are all really, really good services. Although I do think that they have free modes, you can also pay for them and get a few more features. And I would say probably one of the last things I wanted to mention is on probably the most extreme end. If you're really, really concerned about your privacy, is you can change your entire operating system. You can use something like Linux Tails, and the Tails actually stands for the Amnesic Incognito Live System. And really, what Linux Tails does is it pretty much takes all of your incoming and outgoing information and it runs it through that Tor browser. It runs it through that encryption and sending it from multiple servers, multiple nodes and relays along the way. And it's really going to, and I believe it even prevents non-anonymous traffic from leaving your connection. So it really, it's going to take everything to the next level. To me, if you are running, let's say, a Linux Tails and you're using the Tor browser and you're using DuckDuckGo to do your searches and you're not using any form of social media, it's really going to be incredibly difficult for kind of anyone, say, from a very motivated federal government from seeing what you are doing on the internet. So um, I, I would also like to point out that if you wanted to give, let's say, a Linux Tails a shot, or honestly any other kind of Linux distribution, you can always just put those on a USB drive or on a flash drive and just quickly kind of load those up and give that a shot for a week or 2 weeks, just like kind of anything else. And just like I was saying with VPNs, you can always download Opera and just use that built-in VPN and just see if you maybe like the idea of the privacy and you can kind of give up a little bit of that speed. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I kind of have and everything that I kind of wanted to cover. I didn't really want to get too much into security. I really wanted to kind of keep it into a few things that you could do to just be more private online. So as you can see here, if you guys have any questions, I'll be hanging out for probably at least another 5 minutes. But if you guys have any kind of questions or even any ideas for other webinars, you could always email us at hello@dospace.org. If you ever wanted to keep up with us and keep up with what we're doing, even while the building's closed, we have all of our kind of live events and webinars on dospace.org. You can check out our calendar page. And of course, you can, excuse me, and of course, you can, even though I just kind of lambasted social media here, you can, of course, always follow us on Facebook and kind of see what we have coming up. And if you missed any of our webinars, or if you just wanted to check out maybe some of the things that we did in the past, whether it's Kid Coders or kind of intro to PowerPoint or intro to Excel, you can always check out our YouTube page. The vast majority of them are going up on that YouTube page. So yeah, with that, if you guys have any questions, I'll definitely be here sticking around. Looks like maybe we have a question. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'll be here. I'll be sticking around for at least, like I said, another kind of 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to answer any questions. But yeah, hopefully you guys got something out of that. Personally, like I was saying, the vast majority of kind of this, it really isn't to, let's say, stop, let's say, some sort of a federal government. It really is just to you maybe have some sort of a concern with, or maybe are just maybe a little bit creeped out at how much of your data and how much of your information these companies are storing and saving. And hopefully you guys found some of these tips and tricks. Hopefully you guys are going to be able to, any precautions of Twitter? Man, that is a really good question. Personally, I do not use Twitter. I actually follow some of these rules. I actually am pretty anti-social media in the real world. I'm not entirely certain, man. That really is a good question. You kind of threw me for a loop there. Any specific? I really can't think of anything. Let's say specific to Twitter. Just that general kind of know who you're following, know who's following you, type of tip, type of suggestion. But yeah, man, I really truly don't use Twitter. Um, I I would probably say the exact same thing as well. To just don't actually use the Twitter app. Yep, exactly. Use it inside of the browser. That's gonna make it a little bit more private. Although, like I was saying earlier, once you're using any form of social media, that, like I said, it's the exact opposite of privacy. Any information that you're giving out there is the exact opposite of privacy. Everything that you say is being saved and is being used. Although, like I was saying, not really for nefarious purposes, really just to kind of collect data on you so they can better understand you and so they can better sell things to you. It looks like we have a raised hand here. Where is the raised hand? Mhm. Hey, hey. Mm. Oh yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would definitely agree with don't save anything in any of your public credentials to any credentials to any sort of public computers. I would also even recommend that maybe if you were accessing, let's say, social media, yeah, no, no, yeah, maybe if you were accessing any form of well, excuse me, lost my train of thought there. Maybe if you were accessing any form of social media, you could always okay, yep, definitely always log out and close your browser. But yeah, if you're excuse me, excuse me, yeah, if you were utilizing any form of social media, you could always, like I was saying earlier, you could always have multiple different profiles, and you could even what I like to do when I am using social media is I like to use, let's say, a specific profile on my Firefox. So I only have this profile created to view my social media, and that way it further kind of compartmentalizes me. So that way they don't really know that, like, so that way even if I am being tracked, even if some stuff is getting through, it's all kind of being saved to this profile that I only use for social media. I only use this profile in Firefox for social media. That's another tip that I kind of left off there. Any tips, kind of red flags about terms and conditions? Honestly, they all kind of vary. I just did a Gmail video. They all kind of vary. I would have to look up a specific terms and conditions. We could definitely point them out. I think all of us have seen those terms and conditions. We've all looked through them and scrolled through them, and we've all seen how maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally dense they are. But I think in terms of social media, like it's to me, pretty much everything I read there, I kind of cringe, which is why I wasn't able to answer your kind of Twitter question. I always read them and I'm always like, I think I'll pass. I think I'll be all right without Twitter, which some of you definitely won't be able to kind of make that sacrifice. Some of you definitely won't be able to give up Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, that's probably going to be the hardest one. That of kind of everything I said, VPNs are really easy to kind of get and manage. Changing your browser, even kind of changing the settings in your browser are really easy to kind of do. But giving up that social media, that is going to be really, really difficult. I think especially in kind of this time of COVID, where we're all much, much more distant from each other. Face-to-face interactions are much, much less. But maybe kind of post COVID, definitely it should definitely be something that I would personally consider. As like I was saying earlier, it really is the exact opposite of privacy. You really are kind of encouraged to kind of say exactly what you like, exactly what you did today, exactly what you're doing tomorrow. Just give out as much information about yourself as quickly as humanly possible. It is truly the exact opposite of privacy. So I mean, it's really beneficial if you maybe like sales. It's really beneficial for advertisers who want to sell things to you and to corporations that want to hold your data, but not necessarily beneficial if you are concerned with your privacy. But like I said, it's a little bit of a trade-off. You will get the convenience of kind of advertisers knowing what you like and are interested in, but your information will be less private. It's a little bit of a trade-off. And so yeah, if you have any more questions, like I said, I'll be sticking around for another minute or two here. So hopefully I answered you guys' questions. All right. All right. So now, yeah, I think I'll just kind of say again, if you guys do think of any questions later on, you can definitely email hello@dewspace.org. If you guys are interested in even any like VPNs, I think something that I failed to mention on my VPN page is that even for your phone, there are VPNs. There are free VPNs. I think Cloudflare, if I'm not mistaken, has a free VPN for your phone. I think it's 1.1.1.1. I think something like that. But you can definitely, like I said, I was trying not to recommend too many kind of applications or services, or just because the kind of vetting process is a little bit kind of cumbersome. I didn't want to recommend something that kind of later on turned out to not be as great as I kind of suspected it was. So, but yeah, definitely VPN. Maybe consider using a Tor browser. Consider using DuckDuckGo. Consider changing DuckDuckGo to your primary search engine. Um, yeah, and on the extreme end, maybe consider running Linux Tails. It's personally, I run a version of Linux. I actually don't run Tails. I don't need that much security or privacy, but I do run a version of Linux. You definitely will trade a little bit of convenience, but it's to me, it's worth it. It's a much more secure operating system. It's a much more private operating system. But yeah, if we don't have any more questions, I'm gonna go ahead